kid goes to the emergency room. He's vomiting. His stomach hurts. It woke him up from sleep. He vomits again in the emergency room and goes home 2 hours later, sits at home with his mom all day while they watch movies. He throws up every time he tries to eat or drink, and when they go to sleep that night, he doesn't wake up, but his mom does. That's a case I have right now.
This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
All right, we're back, RVA Trial Lawyers, and today we have Rand Robbins with us. Rand Robbins works as a personal injury trial lawyer in the Richmond area. Rand, it's a real pleasure to have you. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, guys. First of all, probably ought to note that I'm probably unqualified to be here and be a podcast guest of any kind, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I've listened to a few of the other episodes, and y'all are doing a good job. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Introduction-wise, these days I have a partner, Michael Lance. He's a guy I've worked with for 10 years. It's just the two of us. We've got a couple staff that work for us. We're small. You pick up the phone to call us. We pick up the phone. We like doing it that way because we get to know our clients a lot better. We think we do a better job when we're working that way. How did I get here? Lance and I left a larger PI firm 4 or 5 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, where we worked together for maybe 5 years. That's where I started doing plaintiff's work, was at this larger firm. And Lance had been there for like 30 years at that point. So he's on Medicare now, which is kind of odd, but he's a great partner. And maybe the way to go is back it up a little bit farther than that and go forward instead of going backwards.
Yeah, you're from Richmond.
Yeah, grew up here, went to collegiate, went to Woodbury, went to college in Chapel Hill, came home. I studied journalism in college and wanted to be a reporter. And I graduated in 2005, went to journalism school, worked for the Daily Tar Heel, was an editor in the newsroom, did the beat reporting. My beat was Orange County School Board for a while, Orange County, North Carolina. And when I graduated was 2005, and finding a job at a newspaper at that point was next to impossible.
What's a newspaper?
Right, precisely. If I'd had a little bit more foresight, I would have seen that, hey, this internet thing is actually kind of taken off and you can write whatever you want and put it on the internet for free. You know, maybe I would have wound up in a different podcast at this point.
Or completely record whatever you want to.
Yeah, yeah. Congratulations on being chosen for the bench, too. That's quite an honor.
I appreciate you so greatly.
And quite an honor to be in the same room with you.
I appreciate you.
For our listeners, Mr. Niall Abuzaki is now Judge Abuzaki, so we are privileged to be in his presence.
I appreciate you. It's my pleasure to be sitting with you all today.
Well, Rand, you're the star of the show today. So you were doing journalism. I imagine to some extent you're probably really interested in the investigative stuff, right?
That's right.
Which I'm guessing ultimately led to, hey, let's take it up a notch and go be a lawyer.
Yeah, so my job search for reporting gigs was frustrating and short. And I wound up needing a job, and I got a job as a paralegal at Hunt & Williams. And I was in the litigation department, and it actually was a little bit like reporting. Our job at that point was I was traveling around the country, going to old industrial facilities and basically interviewing people or helping the lawyers interview people, reviewing old documents that pertain to asbestos and products that contained asbestos that were necessary for the industrial process. I'm not going to tell you which industrial process, but needless to say, there was a lot to look at and find. So unbeknownst to me, I became sort of a quasi-expert in asbestos litigation and asbestos, which is quite a story unto itself.
And it's still a thing.
It
right?
is.
It's not over.
I was talking to my friend and former opponent, Hugh McCormick, who practices in Newport News. They are starting a trial for a living mesothelioma patient on Monday in Newport News against Dominion Power. So that's a big case, potentially, and that's a whole nother story about, you know, what happens in asbestos cases. What is mesothelioma? How does it come about? So backing up a little bit, I had this paralegal job. I had it for a couple of years. I thought, all right, well, this is pretty interesting. It looks like these folks are maybe not necessarily enjoying what they're doing, but this is busy. There's action. It's got a historical angle, which I liked. So after a couple of years of doing that work, I started applying to law school, wound up getting into American in DC, and said, hey, this looks kind of like a way to be a reporter, be an investigator, but actually have a viable career too. No disrespect to reporters, But at that point, it was just like,
You want to make some money.
yeah, it was next to impossible to get a job that you could pay the rent with. So went to law school and did okay with it early on, and then found a little bit of rhythm when I took evidence from a guy named Paul Rice. He's a guy who wrote a textbook on evidence, and he was a real authority on federal rules of evidence in particular, but state rules. He was a guy who would fail you in your third year. So he pushed the students really hard. He was demanding. And over the course of my academic career and professional career, more pressure, more stress has typically, that's when I do my best. If it's sort of a cakewalk or, whatever, you don't have to show up to class, you don't have to do your homework, I'm not getting a good grade in that class. But if you could make an F and have to take your third year of law school over again, I'm going to make an A. And I did. And I loved him. And I think he thought I was all right too. He tried to help me get a job out of school. And so my timing for coming out of law school was also not great. Finished in 2010. That was still the great financial crisis. And I remember competing with folks who had been laid off from corporate jobs for entry-level legal jobs at that point. So in 2008, tons of people got laid off, especially big law firms, the employers that you would know about if you were in DC in law school, or really any law school for that matter, unless you were really dialed in before you went, which I was not. There was an oversupply of young lawyers and an undersupply of spots. So I wound up doing document review work up there for a while, which was humbling. We were basically working for, it was one young associate at this large corporate firm who was basically overseeing all of us lawyers clicking through a bunch of documents about some retail store. I can't even remember what it was. But so that lasted for a while. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to go home. I came back to Richmond in 2011. Still wasn't like a thriving job market at that point, but I started developing personal connections with people. I still have this notebook that I made where I'd ask somebody to meet with me, have coffee, have lunch, have a drink. And I'd ask them, can you just tell me a couple more people to talk to? I still have the notebook because it was a lot of shoe leather to try to find a job. And I wound up volunteering at Legal Aid and got me into court a little bit. I had done some landlord-tenant clinic work in law school, so I had been in court some. And I had an internship with a DC Court of Appeals judge named Inez Smith Reed, who was kind of a legend, actually. Not that I was a legend at all, not at that job or any job, but Legal Aid got me into court. And one day I ran into the twin brother of a guy who I had coffee with, like identical twin. And this is George Naylor I ran into. I went and, said hi to him in the courtroom. And I was like, I'm looking for a job here, volunteering for Legal Aid. What are you up to? And he was doing insurance defense work at that point, but his brother had gotten into insurance defense work too, if I remember correctly. And he was like, I need bodies, like yesterday. So I called him up, and next thing you knew, I had a job doing insurance defense law.
That's awesome.
It was a great break. And it was just a matter of showing up, really, and chasing down leads that I was not working hard to get, but I wasn't being shy about trying to find a job, trying to meet people. And one of the great benefits of that exercise was that network still serves me well today. A lot of those people I'm still in touch with. Some of them are on the bench. Some of them are the managing partners of larger or mid-sized law firms in town. A lot of people gave me the time of day, took the time to educate me, have coffee, just be kind and generous with their time. That's one thing I figured we would talk about during this, however much time we spend together, is you have, I think, a responsibility to pay that forward and share your time with younger folks and try to help folks along, because we all needed help coming along. And I was very, very fortunate in that regard.
No, absolutely. And I certainly can name a number of people who've helped me significantly kind of find my way. And I'm Your Honor, I'm sure you have some people in mind as well. But it's an important part of our practice, right? And it's becoming increasingly more important because mentorship isn't, I don't think, as abundant as it once was. And there's a number of reasons for that.
Without a doubt.
Billable hour, right? That doesn't incentivize time with mentorship, right? And anyways, but yeah, there's a number of reasons. And so it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
There's a silver lining to that financial crisis, right? It's that network that you created.
Sure.
That network that you created that you didn't see that silver line until so many years later, and it fruitioned into this safety net for you. And not only a safety net, but also a mentorship group of people that you can call and be like, hey, and not a lot of people have that today anymore, right? And we don't know how to reach out and be like, hey, how do you do this? Pick up the phone call and call. It's all either text message or it's an email, and that face-to-face, that notebook that springs from one person to another is no longer there.
Yep. There's no substitute for getting out of the office and getting face-to-face with other lawyers and just anybody, witnesses in your case, your clients. I love getting out of the office and talking to people, being with them. I think you do a better job as a personal injury lawyer and probably as a criminal defense attorney or prosecutor, getting out of the office or at least picking up the phone and hearing somebody's voice when you're trying to find out some information. And also these days, AI is going to change the legal field in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it'll be good. I think a lot of people are going to wind up out of work, maybe not litigators, criminal prosecutors, criminal defense attorneys, and trial lawyers, I think, have some insulation from that.
Open judges too.
Yeah. You got to have the judges.
I don't know. Google gives me all the answers, and they're always right. So.
They're not appealable, right?
No.
But no matter how many jobs you can do with a AI program, whatever, there is always going to be a desire and a value to human connection. No machine is going to be able to replace that. And so if you try to foster that as you're building your career, you'll be well served.
Absolutely. And just to dig in a little bit on the work that we do, right? The personal injury plaintiffs work, it is about human life, right? It is about the value of someone's pain and suffering. I mean, the line that I use over and over again, I think I got it from Keith Mitnick, or at least a version of it, but it's not an award, right? When you get a verdict,
prize.
Not a prize, right? It's recognition for what was taken at no fault of your own from your health and your quality of life. And so the real crux of it is we're trading dollars, right, in a way to try and recognize or symbolize the value of human life. So the more human you can be, frankly, probably the better, right? I mean, because that's what this work is about. And I think oftentimes in this profession, we lose sight of that when we start talking about, well, how many files do you have? Or what are the medical bills?
Bills.
Right? And like the medical bill thing is crazy to me because it doesn't make any sense that a medical professional, not even a doctor, right? Like some admin person decides to charge a certain amount, and then we somehow think that has some correlation to the full and fair value of what was taken from someone's health and quality of life. And I mean, there's tons of absurd examples, right? You lose an eye, not much a doctor can do for you. So what, your medical bills will be a few $1,000s, yet now you don't have an eye for the rest of your life, right? Like, what's the value of that yet?
Or a death case.
Sure, death case, right? So anyways, but no, the human touch is really what this is all about.
You know what, Sharif? The value of something. Yesterday I was covering a sentencing for a colleague of mine where the defendant gave her sister's information. So on arraignment, the sister didn't know that she had a felony warrant, so she didn't show up for arraignment. So now there's a capias for arrest. So then the sister gets picked up in Fairfax, and she spends about 3 or 4 days in jail, but she didn't really do anything because the defendant gave her sister's information. So when I got up before the court, I was like, what is the value to the 3 or 4 days that this innocent person who was just driving down the road, who got pulled over and got locked up for 3 or 4 days, what is the value of that to the Commonwealth? And I kept on thinking about I was like, there is no price to it, but to me, it's about 9 months in jail. Because you tell me now, hey, what do you trade for?
I know. Well, yeah, I've got another line for that. It's all arbitrary, so make it arbitrarily high, right?
Exactly.
So like, especially when we're coming down to putting a dollar figure on things.
Yeah, well, I was listening to some of these y'all's prior interviews, and you asked that same question about how do you figure that out?
Yes.
How do you assign a dollar figure to pain, to suffering, to mental anguish, to inconvenience, disfigurement, scarring, embarrassment? And you were talking about, the Wacoly board and how you can break it up and lets you sort of talk in more particularized terms about what the jury is supposed to think about when they're going to reach a number, which is a hard ask. It's hard for the jury to do. I haven't gotten really good with that yet, the Wacoly board, but I'm working on it, and I use it in all my trials now. But what we're not allowed to say to the jury in a closing argument is, hey, put yourself in my client's shoes.
Yeah, the golden rule.
How much would you have to be paid to do this? to lose a leg, to have to live with a colostomy bag, to lose a loved one. What do I have to pay you to go through that?
And I think the human story, right, is huge too. I mean, and that goes back to your point, Rand, about getting out of the office, meeting with your clients, meeting with their family members or friends, and just really understanding the impact. We had this come up in a case the other day, actually a case that we have set for trial in March, and I've got co-counsel and they're awesome. But we were talking about like, our experts, they're just not giving us great like stuff on futures. And I'm like, well, let's take a step back and realize that the expert, they're just a part of this case. Let's go back and revisit like our client's deposition testimony and listen to what he has to say. And let's talk about the real experts in the case, which are the family, the friends, the colleagues who knew him before and know him after and can tell very clearly without hesitation that there's a difference. Those are the real experts in the case. That's the jury can relate to them, right? Versus the paid opinion witness. Not to say that the paid opinion witness isn't necessary. They are. But I think the value comes from, again, that kind of human element.
Yeah. Experts are a big part of almost all of our, every single one of our malpractice cases. And in a way, they're a part of every personal injury case. But your client is, I was told by Tom McNally, who was at Imrock and Kilduff, where Lance and I worked before we left. Tom was a great guy, former prosecutor in Richmond City. He would often say, your client is Exhibit A, and there is no Exhibit B. So whatever your sort of human element of your case is, whatever the human loss is, has got to be conveyed effectively by your client. The jury has to, maybe if they don't have to like your client, they at least have to empathize with them or sympathize with them in order to come back with a verdict that makes people feel whole.
You hit the nail on the head. Everyone is a story. And how do you connect that story to the trier of fact, the jurors before you? I'll tell you, yesterday, I called a case and had my victim walk up to my right. And when they walked the defendant out, the defendant had pointed an AK-47 at him and robbed him. I looked at my victim as soon as the defendant walked out. And he kind of just had this little like shake to him. And he looked down and he couldn't look to his left. So I came and whispered in his ear. I was like, it's okay. I was like, do you have this feeling right here in your chest? Does it feel heavy? He goes, yes. I was like, I promise you that when we go up to circuit court, the time that I get is going to try to alleviate that feeling for you. It's that feeling. It's that human reaction, right? It's how do you connect to the human that's before you, and how do you try your case to the emotions? Because that's what moves the jury. And the question is, and especially in a lot of personal injury cases, when you have the battle of the experts, how do you not lose that story and continue to have that Exhibit A?
I've got a good story about that. It's a painful story too. My partner and I, before we had left, we tried a bunch of malpractice cases together. So let me back up and tell you how I got to do plaintiff's trial work.
Yeah, that'd be great. And actually, did you know in law school that you wanted to do this type of work?
I knew I wanted to do litigation.
But not necessarily.
And then Paul Rice, once I got through Rice's evidence class, I knew I wanted to do trial work.
Got it. Now, how about like, yeah, absolutely.
From the start, yeah.
No, for sure. But like, how about, so, and I asked because I didn't even know what like personal injury was in law school, which is probably a comment on how great of a student I was, right? Which the answer was not a good one. But did you know at all that you wanted to get into like personal injury stuff, or?
I did not know that I wanted to be a plaintiff's attorney until I was doing defense work.
Got it.
So I did insurance defense work for this small firm. We had some big cases. We had a nice line of business there. I left there after circling back with somebody in my notebook and wound up at a firm called Spots Fane, which is full of great people from Richmond. And, you know, it's just a Richmond firm, one office.
Well, it's a VMI firm, right?
Yeah, big time VMI firm,
That's right.
VMI Mafia.
That's right. The cult is real.
It is. So I wound up working for a guy named Harry Ware there, who has since passed away, but was a great guy who really gave me a huge break and helped me to develop as a lawyer in a way that I haven't really had other mentors do. PJ Turner was his associate, and she had a bunch of very small kids at the time, and I was sort of brought in to gap fill because she was very effective as a mother and a lawyer at the same time, but just couldn't be in two places at once, but so often. So Harry really, he gave me a lot of opportunities to do asbestos defense work. And this is how I know the guys from Newport News, where the world's largest shipyard is, or America's largest shipyard. There are an incredible number of mesothelioma cases that originated in Newport News Shipyard, Norfolk Naval Shipyard, just from all the shipbuilding work. And we don't have to get into all that medicine, but long story short is that's where I got my first real exposure to big-time plaintiffs' attorneys. And they're pioneers in the asbestos litigation world, particularly this guy, Bobby Hatton, who's probably been around trying these cases since the 70s. And initially, he got his head bashed in, but he kept fighting. He had an office doing longshore work at the Newport News Shipyard, and he was like, this is wrong. I'm going to right this wrong the best way I can, the best way our system affords an opportunity to do. Eventually, he started winning. And long story short is the asbestos litigation has evolved many times since then. So the practice from my standpoint was lots of depositions with either dying people dying of a terrible cancer, or people they worked with in shipyards or on commercial vessels or in industrial settings. I just found myself much more drawn to them than to the other side of the case, really. I sympathized with them in a way that made me want to represent injured people. But at the time, I was happy with my job. I loved the people I worked with. I still do, still stay in touch with them. And it was a great gig. And I got to do some other work while I was there at Spots Fane. And speaking of VMI connections, Meet Spots came in, and this was my first opportunity to play offense in a courtroom. He came into my office one day and dropped a manila folder on my desk. It had about 3 pieces of paper in it. And he said, "You can take care of this, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir, will do." So I opened it up, called the client. It was a warrant and debt filed out in Charlotte County. Somebody filled it out by hand, a pro se guy who drove a logging truck in Charlotte County. And he had sued the sawmill owner because the sawmill owner had stiffed him on a couple of loads of lumber that he had delivered to the mill. And he wanted to get paid for that, so he sued him. So I called the client, and he explains to me that, he delivered the logs. Yeah, he did. And no, I didn't pay him. And so I said, well, why didn't you pay him? He said, well, he and the scales operator have been in cahoots. They've been stealing from me for I don't know how long. But I figured it out. And so I figured, if I didn't pay him, we'll just call it even. But then he sued me. I'm not real happy about that. I'd like for you to do what you can to settle the score, for lack of a better way of putting it. So that was my first chance to really dig into a case. I got, FOIA requests to the Charlotte County law enforcement folks. Turns out they had interviewed the scale operator because he was a convicted felon and actually was a convicted murderer. So they interviewed him on video. He copped the entire thing. They were in cahoots to basically put a thumb on the scale or increase the grade of the logs that the guy was delivering so that he would get paid more, and then they would split the money. So we go to court. So I file a counterclaim for business conspiracy and fraud against the truck driver. We go to court. The guy hires a lawyer maybe a couple days before the trial, and I don't think the lawyer really had an opportunity to understand what the case was about at that point. I don't know if the guy told him the truth or not, because they put their case on breach of contract. I delivered these logs to the sawmill. I didn't get paid. And that's pretty much all the evidence in a contract claim. So the judge says, okay, you rest your case, plaintiff, counterclaim plaintiff, go on and put your case on. So somehow get the judge to just watch the video of the interview with this scale operator. And this plaintiff who had sued my sawmill guy, his face turned gray. You could watch the blood drain out of his face. And the lawyer was not as perturbed. I don't think he, but it was very satisfying to see that guy's reaction to what, the truth coming out, really. Then I qualified my client in his own business and the business of running a sawmill. Had him explain all of his records where he could show, I lost, we're talking about a couple $1,000s each way here. So not a huge case, but it mattered to them. And he proved his loss to a reasonable degree of certainty. We proved that the defendant was engaged in a conspiracy with another party to steal from my client, which entitled us to attorney's fees and treble damages. And so I won all that for my guy, who was thrilled. I'm not sure he ever got paid any of it because the guy, I don't think he had, 2 nickels to rub together. But I think a big part of the value of a verdict is just hearing that you win.
Yeah.
The money is important, obviously, as the time is for a prosecutor, but in a way that I think we all have to acknowledge, the number of years, days, months that a defendant gets is arbitrary in the same way that the number of dollars and cents a plaintiff gets awarded. By that, I don't mean it doesn't matter.
It's that validation. Like, and to push it a step further, like I remember losing a trial in the Army, and I remember going out to the parking lot, and like the client came up, and like I was certainly upset, but the client was grateful. He's like, "Man, like you fought for me. Thank you. You did everything you could."
I've had that happen a couple times.
You know, and I think it's just when someone sees that you care and watches you put in the work and do everything that they can on their behalf. Like, I mean, I think sometimes that's it. That's all they want, right? They just want that validation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have never had a client in a personal injury case who'd been like, I'd rather have the money, or I'd take the money any day and give me another injury just like this so I can do it again, right? Like it's always like I want the other party to be held responsible. I want them to take accountability, right? Like this idea of like admitting liability last minute infuriates my clients because it's like, why are they playing games? Like this happened to me, it's real, and yet they're trying to say that it didn't happen or that I'm lying. So I agree with you, Rand. Like that verdict is...
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And
like
now
I
think on the criminal side too, right? I mean
now on a state side, accepting responsibility is taken into consideration for sentencing guidelines, right? So it kind of reduces the sentencing guidelines when a defendant does in fact accept responsibility. It is important for a victim as a prosecutor not to have to take the stand and then be, in my mind, victimized again, and his character being put at issue to try to say, hey, I was victimized. Someone did me wrong. It is important to me that someone accepts responsibility, and I give them credit for it when they do. So yes, it's that. And often you have those victims that don't cooperate because either the streets has its own code or they just don't want to do it for some reason. And I sit a victim down. I'm like, well, let me tell you. So I have this jury trial, and I usually meet with them a couple of weeks before. And I tell them, look, I have this jury trial in 2 weeks. If I put your jury trial on, I'm going to be working about 80 hours next week and the week after, and I probably will not have a weekend. Now, I want you to ask yourself, how much more money you think I'm going to get paid as a prosecutor when I pursue justice for you and put the case on? And then they start thinking to their mind. And I go, 0. So I'm like, now ask yourself, I wasn't the one that was victimized. I wasn't the one that was shot. I wasn't the one that had my mom lift me up and take me to the bathroom because I couldn't take myself to the bathroom. And why am I wasting 160 hours of my life? And why am I putting all this time and effort when I don't get a single penny? Think about that. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do for you. And often that kind of gets something going in their mind. And I'm like, so do you believe that now? And they start to kind of, nod with me. And the last case I did was a few weeks ago. That's the speech that I gave. So the accountability part and just holding someone accountable is just so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So to circle back to my journey to the plaintiff side, after that experience in Charlotte County, which was a, small dollar case, big deal to the people involved in it, I had an inkling that I wanted to do plaintiff's work, and I had made some inquiries, again, gone back to the notebook and made a few calls. And my old boss, Harry Ware, even helped me. I mean, he introduced me to some of these people that wound up helping me find a plaintiff's job. I finally got hired, got an offer from Bill Kilduff. There's another great mentor, really gave me a huge opportunity to try cases very quickly. And I wound up trying very fast a malpractice case with him and another lawyer at Emrock and Kilduff. And I realized, whoa, this is it. This is as exciting and validating and intellectually stimulating and high stakes, but also, stressful, and there's so much uncertainty if you've never been in front of a jury really, or given an opening statement or picked a jury. But like we were talking about before the show, like I still feel like an imposter a lot of days. And I think we all probably do. Yes. You just get better at it. And eventually, you're doing it. So Kilduff gave me the opportunity to do that. I think I tried 6 or 8 malpractice cases with him and Michael Lance in the first 18 months that I was there.
That's incredible.
Which was a large amount of time in front of a jury for a person of my experience level, and was transformative for my career. And we didn't win all those cases. I think we probably lost more than we won, but we did win a couple of them. And along the way, we got a bunch of them settled. So I sort of unwittingly became a medical malpractice plaintiff's lawyer, which I really enjoy. Unfortunately, it's kind of a growth business, it seems like. You tell people you do malpractice work and the phone rings off the hook.
Yeah, and I imagine case selection is incredibly important.
Yeah, that's the key to the whole thing is once you launch the shuttle, so to speak, and file the case, it's pretty hard to walk that back. You need to keep things simple. We like to keep things real simple. The more complicated it is, the more that plays into the defense's hands. Particularly these issues it's medicine to start with. So simple is a relative term in that field.
How do you manage that balance? And we talked that was where the question was about the experts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it simple, where we're still highlighting the value of the human life or the value of the human impairment.
I guess put a little finer point on it. When I say simple, I'm talking about what is the allegation of negligence. With these things, you want to be able to explain the whole case in about 20 seconds. Obviously, there's more that needs to be peeled back as to your client's injuries or the loss of a family member in particular. Those are bottomless wells of information and emotion and loss. But what happened? The kid goes to the emergency room. He's vomiting. His stomach hurts. It woke him up from sleep. He vomits again in the emergency room and goes home 2 hours later, sits at home with his mom all day while they watch movies. He throws up every time he tries to eat or drink. And when they go to sleep that night, he doesn't wake up, but his mom does. That's a case I have right now. I like that case. It's easy to understand. It's easy to explain. It's relatable to people who've taken children to an emergency department. And obviously that woman's loss and that boy's siblings' loss is incalculable, particularly in the setting of a malpractice case where you've got very large, very well capitalized entities on the defense. They still have the benefit of the medical malpractice cap. So a lot of these cases get tried that probably should get settled because there's no upside risk or downside risk if you're looking at it from the defense standpoint. So, you could get a $100 million verdict. It's getting reduced to $2.6 million for this case. That's wrong, I think. I understand why the cap was put in place way back in the day, but things have changed so much now.
Well, you're talking, I'm they exist, right? I don't like the rationale behind them because you're basically taking away discretion from the judge and the jury. And you can say the same thing with criminal law. The mandatory minimums, sometimes I think they just give the Commonwealth or the federal prosecutor just a ridiculous amount of leverage that you can almost force somebody into a plea just by how you charge something, which is why in the criminal setting that prosecutorial discretion is incredibly important. But yeah, I'm the same page. Like I don't understand the caps. I don't get it. But granted, I'm not the smartest person in the room. So.
Ryan, I want to take you to that 20-second summary that you gave.
Yeah.
And when you said the mom wakes up, but her child doesn't, that was so powerful.
It was, and I want to know what happened.
And let me tell you why I'm bringing that back up. Because a big part of this podcast is trial work. And when you said that, my mind stayed there. So you continue to talk about the case, but I didn't follow. And literally, I kind of stopped with you, and I'm like picturing this mom next to this kid where he's just not waking up. Cold, right?
Stiff.
Yeah, and think about what she's thinking, right? Like,
so I often say, and Sharif and I have touched on this, when you are in a good place or a sweet spot, you just simmer in it. And it's sad that that's the sweet spot of the case, but that's what kind of just...
Well, that's what the case is about.
Exactly. That's where value is. That's where value is.
Let me offer something.
It's so sad to hear.
Yes, sad to hear. But if we push it a little bit farther, right? Like, what's going through the mom's mind? We don't know unless we get out of the office and talk to her, right? But like, isn't there some level of helplessness she thought she did what she should have done by going to the hospital. Maybe a feeling of betrayal, right? Like, I did my job. I took my kid to the hospital, got him checked up. They said A, B, C, and here he is gone. I mean, the emotion going through her head, I think is massive.
And I'll tell you, the reason why I brought that up and brought you back to it, as soon as you said it, I kind of wanted you to stop. Just say, think about that. So the pause is so powerful. And the reason why it just came to mind when you said it and you continued on with the case, I was like, it's a sad case. It's just so moving.
Yeah.
You're right about the, I guess you wouldn't call it negative space, but just be quiet. You make a point, let it hang.
Let it hang.
Yeah. We'll also think about the framing, like how you chose to tell that story makes a massive difference, right? And will make a massive difference.
Yeah, you have to tell it from mom's perspective because that's, I think, relatable. You take your child to the emergency room, you leave under the impression that he has a stomach bug. He can't keep food down, can't keep water down, but they didn't give you the impression that his life was in jeopardy when you were in the hospital. And that's because they didn't do any testing on the child.
And then you dig in, right? It's, well, why didn't they do the right testing? Because they had who knows how many patients to doctors, right? Like, and why were they understaffed? Well, because the hospital is trying to cut costs here and there in order to increase the bottom line. And then that's me going off.
There are a lot of different ways you can go with it.
Yeah, it's the podcast does not, and that's the thing. We're not in court. We're not trying this case. The podcast does not take in physical reaction or, as you were saying that, I'm just like shaking my head and I'm kind of taking myself
we don't have
back.
video cameras for a good reason, right? Like, I'm not trying to break any lenses or anything.
So, but no, it's best of luck with that case. And that's and I hope justice is served.
Yeah, that's one where, my heart's in the case big time. And that mother is one of the most resilient, toughest people I've encountered in my practice. And that's one of my favorite things about plaintiff's practice is the toughness and resilience of clients of mine who obviously something terrible has happened to them. A lot of times they didn't have a lot of advantages to begin with. And to see those people pick themselves up off the mat and carry on with life as best they can is inspiring. And it's awesome. One of my favorite parts about it.
Their mothers
mostly
are probably the only ones that can't imposter. Yeah. They're the only ones that can do that. Right?
Yeah.
They're as resilient.
One of the several incredible things about that case that we were talking about earlier is she calls 911 when she wakes up in the morning and the EMTs come and she's despondent. So they call the police just to make sure so they can do their job. So they're all wearing body cameras and they catch on camera the moment that she learns that her son is gone. And it is one of the heaviest things I have ever watched.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
I can only imagine being in her shoes.
Yes.
I mean, the confusion and you can almost see her like falling.
What I'm going to share with you, there is a video that the Cleveland Clinic,
I've got it saved on my phone,
has put together on empathy.
It's fantastic.
And it's one of those videos that I watch often to not lose sight of how everyone is a walking story and how events in their life affect them. And the reason why I bring that up, that mom is not just like any other mom. That event has shaped everything about her life today. So that empathy video from the Cleveland Clinic is the video that I play often, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You should. Yeah. You should. It's an excellent video. It's the more, and I'm on this board with a bunch of physicians, and we were talking about it and how just to not lose sight of your patients. And when the patient comes in, for you as a physician, this is what you do day in and day out. So you're like, oh, okay, just do this and do that, and you're good to go. And the patient is walking out. I was like, well, okay, so what did he just say? What do those terms mean? What is the medication going to do? What? And then they go and start to Google. you got to sit down and slow down. And that's one of those things that I bring up to, younger prosecutors is when you have a witness or a victim, that witness or a victim, or even a plaintiff, they've thought about this case for months. They've talked to their family. They've talked to their friends. They've reached to other people that know attorneys. They've played out that trial in their mind. They played out testifying in their mind. There's that anxiety, that feeling that's right here, right, under their chest, that's just there. You can't lose sight of that. And we often do because we do it every single day.
Right.
I know that mother we were talking about would do anything she could to get away from that.
Yeah. And you can ask her, what amount of money? Let me take you back to the night of. What amount of money can we give you to take away your child? And she'd be like, there isn't an amount that you can give. There is not an amount that you can give me that I can say, hey, yeah, you can take the life of my child, or you can neglect the life of my child. You can breach that duty. There is no amount. So power to you. And Sharif often used to tell me, now that plaintiff work is a lot like what you do, and that's making sure you do the right thing for victims that have been victimized and telling their story. And in this case, yes.
You certainly tried to.
Yeah, and plaintiff work is fun. I mean, I am starting to do much more than just a regular car wreck. I mean, the bouncer case that we talked about beforehand, getting on the air.
The Henrico case.
The Henrico case, right? But that's actually funny enough. I was thinking about that when it came up. But like, had they just come to that client and said, "We're so sorry this happened, and we'll help you like get the thing expunged and all that," it was a wrongful arrest case. Like, I wouldn't have never been involved, right? So, and same can be said. Everyone knows about the McDonald's hot coffee case. Well, that was in New Mexico. Like, if you look into the facts, like, she asked them to pay her medical bills for like 20 grand or something, and they said no. And so then they filed a lawsuit. Like, it's incredible to me that if you just like show up and like take responsibility, like, you'll put us out of a job.
You know what it is, Sharif? It's ego. And I'll tell you, so I'm not going to get into the details of the Henrico case, but Sharif and I, very close friend, one of my best friends, we've spoken about the case, and it was simple to resolve that case. And I don't know why it wasn't resolved, but we knew that, the plaintiff came out much better than if they started a conversation. It's simple to resolve a case if you actually just reach out and put the ego aside and say, you know what, let's focus on the human element of someone serving some time and being the wrong person that we've arrested. How much is each day in jail worth to someone that's never spent a day in jail?
We'll even forget the money. Just bring them in, shake their hand, say, we're sorry, and what can we do to make things right? And guess what? There would likely have never been a lawsuit.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But this is good work. But no, what I was getting to is that this line of work is fascinating. We've got sex assault cases now. We've got a case against Ford on product liability, carbon monoxide poisoning that now we're representing a police officer instead of suing a police officer, which is nice. And then the car wrecks. And so it's a really cool practice area. And it is like, I think similar to you, Rand, that I just blessed to have found it because this wasn't a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, at this point, I don't think I would want to practice law if I had to do something else.
Oh, I agree. I think I would rather like do landscaping versus like do corporate billable hours.
That's pretty close to the top of my list too.
Yeah. No, in all seriousness, and not to say that work is bad. It's not. There are good people who do that work. It's necessary work, but I just have trouble getting excited over it.
For me, it's either flipping blizzards at DQ or trial work.
Blizzard sounds really good, though. But,
it's either, and I'll
you've
tell
got a connection, right? Your Honor.
Slight connection. I'll tell you, doing trial work and transitioning now from being a trial attorney and a prosecutor and champion the voices of victims. And that's what a prosecutor does. I'm kind of grieving losing that standing in court to tell the story. And you started your career by wanting to tell a story. It started with in a paper, and now you're doing it in an arena, in a courtroom. How has where you started to where you're at now kind of satisfied that urge to tell the story?
I'm very grateful to be where I am today. And I don't often take a step back and think, man, 15 years ago, you were begging people to have coffee with you to do anything in the legal field. And today you got your own shop, got a partner.
We've been trying to get you on this podcast. Look at that.
Fancy. It's not fancy, but we think we're not bad at it.
But you're not. You guys are doing great work.
We get to represent resilient, honorable people who have been wronged in one way or another and find some measure of justice for them. And there's a great deal of satisfaction that comes in that. But, on the day-to-day, it's a grind, like any kind of practice of law. And, your question, I hadn't really thought about that big picture in a long time. So appreciate the nudge.
Clearly, you're doing a great job. And
there are a lot of great lawyers doing this work in town, and I'm lucky to have them as colleagues, and I'm just happy to be in the game.
What's the common denominator is that when we sit with these great lawyers, they have this transparency about them where it allows them to connect to that person that's sitting right in front of them. I am in the criminal bar, and I'm not very involved in a civil bar. Sitting down across from you, I feel that connection. And that's why you are a successful lawyer. You're a good human being doing good work and telling stories for those that have been victimized.
And caring. And that's, if you care, it's amazing how far that takes you.
And today I said it. I was having lunch with the violent crime team in my office, and on my way out, I'm like, you can teach anyone, a monkey eventually to do something. But you can't teach a human being to be a good or a great human being. That's got to come from within. And that's what you start with. And for me, Sharif and I have talked about it. Great people make great trial attorneys because that authenticity comes out. That allows you to connect with the people that's in front of you. And that's what we want.
Well, that's a great compliment. I owe a lot of that to my mom.
And that's what we talk about, that we're a product of our upbringing. And that's
our experiences.
Without a doubt. I agree. Your upbringing, your experiences shapes who you are as a human being today.
Yeah, and the things that you thought were horrendous experiences, you look back years later and you realize how much of a gift it actually was.
And I'll tell you, Sharif, the only reason why I'm excited about the future is that I'm thinking about how I can take a small part in that product and hopefully having young men become productive members of society. Well, that's one thing about just being...
Most important job you'll do.
I appreciate you. And, it's...
Well, I don't know. Flipping Blizzard the Dairy Queen sounds pretty important, too.
Love me some DQ, but I'll tell you, it weighs heavy. It does weigh heavy because you want to make sure you do what's right.
That's true. Let me tell you all a good story before we wrap up, and you can figure out if this plays in or not. But
it plays in.
So one of these trials in the sequence of kind of blitzkrieg trial by fire that I had probably 10 years ago now, or 8 years ago, we had a case where a gentleman had hemorrhoids, and the surgeon was going to go in there and remove the hemorrhoids. He did that, but he removed almost the entire rear end of this gentleman. And this man was going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of his life. And we could prove that up, down, and sideways that he took way too much tissue when he did the surgery on this guy. We had pathology. We had slides of the tissue. We had drawings. We had his own notes. We had pictures of our client after the fact. It was from a medical standpoint, a simple case, like we've talked about. You took way too much. Look what happened. And we were blinded to the human element of the case. And I learned a hard lesson during this trial. We had a good settlement offer before the trial, and we turned it down. We told the client to turn it down. He followed our advice. And we tried to get him to say not all that much on direct, because he was let's be honest, he wasn't going to make a great witness. We just wanted him to say, hey, my name's Joe Schmo. This happened to me. Here's the colostomy bag. I'm however old I am, young. Try not to identify this guy.
Yes.
And walk by the jury where they can smell you the way everybody else smells you when you walk by them now. But he insisted on embellishing his story. And I haven't seen my grandkids, to your point about parenting. I haven't been out of the house. I'm trapped at home. I haven't traveled. My marriage is suffering. We lack intimacy. And all this stuff was totally unnecessary. I mean, he wanted to say it, and we said, okay, it's your case. I guess we can't stop you. So he did it, and then cross-examination begins, and up comes his wife's Facebook page, which we had not looked at. And on his wife's Facebook page was a picture of him at the beach with his grandkids with his colostomy bag. Another picture of him out of town doing something fun with his grandkids. And then the last one, the real exclamation point, was a selfie video that he and his wife had taken in the airport on their way home from a cruise, in which they were implying they were exhausted from marital activities undertaken during the cruise. And it didn't change a thing about
medicine, yeah.
what happened to the guy.
Yeah, but credibility's gone, though.
But we learned who the guy was during the trial. He was hitting on the sheriff's deputies, while his wife's in the courtroom, and would say anything, it seemed. I mean, again, didn't change a thing about what happened to him, but we went from thinking, we can't lose this case. We're going to get a cap verdict. Let's go to the wall. And we lost. Defense verdict. We lost the case. And I'll never forget looking over at the defense attorney who tried the case, and he's looking back at me. He goes, I can't believe it. Get up and shook hands with each other like I try to do every time, no matter what happens. But the surgeon stood up and he goes, I'm shocked. So there's a lot to say for what we do. Sometimes you can get it wrong. It's pretty easy to get it wrong. And it's also easy to misread people that you think and that just comes with experience. But that's one of my baddest beats.
Well, they saw that he wasn't
They hated him.
a good human being.
They could
As
not.
simple as
They
that.
could not stand him. They didn't want him to get anything. I mean, we won every phase of the trial except his testimony. The jury was laughing at their experts when we were cross-examining them, and we still lost the case.
Yeah, I guess again, but
Yeah.
it shows what really matters, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. One of the best lessons I ever learned was your client is Exhibit A, and there is no Exhibit B.
That affirmed it for you. That case affirmed it. That's what you run with now.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Rand, this has been fun, man. Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're not done yet. We've got our closing questions. Now you want to take them?
Yes. So we have.
See, we at least we think we pretend we know what we're doing, right?
If you continue to do this over and over again, you start to kind of have some common questions that come
right.
up. And then talking about trial work. First, I'm asking you, what part of the trial do you think is the most important part of the trial?
I think getting an opening statement out the way you want it to come out, and maybe you begin developing that in voir dire. Either that or crossing defense witnesses, I think, are two of the most important moments in a trial.
I agree with both. For me, Sharif and I talk a lot about putting that lens on from the start.
Kind of like you did with that story about the case with the mom.
The primacy, I don't know what the technical term is.
No, that's it.
Recency
That's
and
it.
primacy. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
But then we talk about this all the time. It's like, if you can get people kind of leaning on your way from the beginning, then to get them to change their mind is even harder, because now you're got to convince them to tell themselves that their first impression was wrong. So now you've
Very
got
difficult.
Very difficult.
There's something that we do, and Sharif and I talk about that. I still do it in court till today. When I'm asking a question and I want a yes, I'm nodding yes, and you will see it, that the other side will start to nod with me. And when I want no, I start to shake my head no, and the other side will start to shake their head with me. What am I doing there? I'm not only giving the jury an answer, I'm also giving them this physical exhibit, not A, but B, that they can look at, and it kind of sticks with them. And I don't do it for every question. I do it for my important questions. And we do it at trial, and I do it at trial. And I tell my students, hey, if you just start nodding, they're going to say yes. There's something about it as a human nature. And the same thing we talk about smiling, right? If I smile at someone, they're going to smile back. Smile at the judge. Let the jury see you that you smile at the judge, and let the judge smile back at you. And Sharif and I have talked about that, and we've heard, who was it that talked about smiling at the judge? If the judge smiles back at you and the jury sees it, that carries so much weight. That carries so much weight. So it's those small things throughout the trial, but what's important, I agree. We talk about the opening, and the longer the opening and the longer that you put that lens on and the longer you get their ego invested in your story, the harder it is going to be for the defense side to change that investment in their own ego and what they think is the story of the case.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, your answer is consistent with pretty much everybody else who's been on this podcast, right? So,
well, that's interesting. I didn't actually make it to the end of those episodes that I listened to, so
yeah,
I didn't
So
cheat.
how dare you?
Yeah, I know.
No.
So now I got to ask, what, did you get bored in the middle of the episode? You're like, oh, were you just right?
No. I wanted to get a gist of what was going on and got that consistency. And
Don't worry, we can count on him as a loyal listener now, right?
Exactly.
No,
and
I'm
not only
joking.
that, I'm sure
I'm
he's
signed
gonna,
up.
I'm sure he's going to
You're signed
listen
up?
to this episode.
I hope so.
Well,
right?
we appreciate
God,
you.
I hope not. I don't want to hear my own voice.
No, this
You'll get used to it.
I enjoyed this one. This is great. Well, before we close up, a lot of young lawyers, law students who listen to this podcast, really appreciated you telling the story about how you kind of found your way and the struggles and the notebook and all that. What words do you have for them who are also trying to find their way, especially nowadays where it's just not easy?
Pick up the phone and ask for advice. Somebody told me if you ask for advice, that's the best way to get a job. And if you ask for a job, that's the best way to get advice. You can't be shy. You can't be shy in this work. So I don't think I've ever said no to a young person who asks for help. I can't give people jobs right now, but I can help you because I'm fortunate to know a lot of people in town, and you just have to be your own advocate. Oh, and get out, show up, be places, show up to volunteer, show up to bar events, even when you're in law school. Tell people you're a law student and I'm at the Richmond Bar Association meetings or whatever you might be interested in. Show up, stick your hand out and shake somebody's hand and introduce yourself.
One thing that you said that's important is that when we hear that a person that we meet is a law student, we connect with them and we want to talk to them. And ask yourself why. It's because we've gone through that experience. It's that same like VMI tribe that's created. It's that 3 years of going through law school and the rigorous academic 3 years. For me, it grounds me. It takes me back to why I started doing what I'm doing. And you told us a story about someone you saw yesterday, and you talked about a law student, and then how it just, as soon as he said he's going to his criminal law class or whatever class he was taking, you started a conversation with that young man. So law students, reach out for advice. Every attorney, and at least now you know one that will answer the call and help out with anything you need. But someone did it for us, so we're going to give it back.
The key is don't sit around waiting for somebody to come find you. Blindly applying to online job forums, maybe that works for some people, but Richmond is a town that lives small, and it goes a long way to get out and meet people here.
It works for IT jobs, not trial work jobs.
Yeah.
Get out there.
This is awesome. Thank you, Rand.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast. For more episodes, check out rvatriallawyers.com.